Good evening and welcome to Classic Car Restoration Club Live. We're here ready to answer whatever questions you guys got going. I'm joined by Ross Keihl, and you've seen him before. But in our audience today, we have Terry Wright. He's a professional body man, painter, and currently a technical paint rep for a major paint company that I don't know if I have authorization to tell you because he's here in an unofficial capacity. But thanks for joining us, Terry. If you guys have any questions specifically related to paint and body, we've got like a pro here to answer some of those questions. So that'd be cool, huh?
Yeah.
Actually got somebody who knows what they're talking about, huh?
Not more than I know.
Yep, but there you go. Hopefully you guys have had a good summer. You know, we've had the DeSoto back here has got like a couple thousand miles on it so far this year, and it's been a good year for that car. It's we got a lot of trips on it and put a lot of miles on it. Special shout out to David Frank in Wisconsin, who hosted the DeSoto convention out there. David and the whole Frank family did an outstanding job hosting a great event. Other event, special events that we attended this year. We had recently had a car show at the one of our local churches here,
establishments,
and actually you won an award at that show with your car. The DeSoto back here won an award, and Terry won an award with his '68 Firebird. '68, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And
good year.
So it was a great event. So hopefully you guys have got out, had a chance to enjoy your cars this summer. We know that our friends in the Phoenix area are just now getting their cars out to start enjoying for the year. Because having been to Phoenix, for some reason they put their cars away in the summers. But special shout out, guys, if you ever ever want to have a little break from the snow for you Midwestern guys, head down to that Phoenix Southwest area, even California, middle of winter. The car action is still pretty hot down there then. And let's get started. I know you guys have been plugging away with a few questions already. Also, right below down here, there's a discussion box. There's a little tab that says chat. Don't hit the chat button. That's to contact member services about, the fact that you didn't get your membership or you're missing something there. Those people are glad to help you out. But for this discussion, we're going to the big box right below here, and just feel free to enter your questions. We're going to get started then.
Yeah.
Timothy starts out with the first question, and Timothy has to ask, I'm working on a 1953 M38A1 Willys Jeep, and I imagine that's going to be like a service series military Jeep. I have a lot of surface rust in the gas tank. What's the best way to get it out and clean out my gas tank? Thanks, Timothy.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It's a tough one, and it's the kind of problem that a lot of guys run into because the insides of the gas tank are not generally, on a lot of older cars, they're not coated. They're not even galvanized. There's nothing. It's just bare steel in there. So when they sit empty for long periods of time, just the moisture in the air tends to rust them up. And probably the best solution, there used to be, and they still may be around, there used to be companies called Gas Tank Renew and stuff like that, where you could just bring them their tank and they would go through a process of cleaning the outside and sealing they cleaning the inside and sealing the outsides, and they'd totally refurb your tank and give you a guarantee. I'm sure there's maybe a few of those companies around yet. I know now that most tanks have gone to poly and plastic, those businesses that used to do a stout business aren't as prevalent as they used to be. But, also there's some stuff you can do on your own. There are products out there like Evaporust and some of those kind of liquid rust removers that you could pour in let sit for a few days, and then pour back out again, that actually do a very good job at, removing corrosion. I've never actually tried them, because our number one thought is, if you can buy a replacement tank,
Right.
do it. You're going to be money ahead in the long run. I know for your Chevelle, because we had switched that thing over to E85, and there was some concern with it rusting.
Steel tanks.
Alcohol gas in an old steel tank like that can promote, because alcohol tends to absorb water even out of the air. So there was some concern there. Get away from that. Stainless steel gas tank. So there are a lot more options available today. If you can get a brand new tank, do it. I know on this car we put in it, even though the tank didn't look bad inside, we put a new tank on it, and we know that we're not going to have any issues down the road. Otherwise, yeah, you could try some stuff like the evaporust and some of the other rust removing things and help clean it out. Biggest issue you need to worry about with a gas tank is sometimes by the time you remove all the corrosion and rust, you got weak spots in your tank that show up where they're suddenly weeping gas.
53 might be hard to find another tank, though.
Yeah, but it's still a Jeep. So
if it's a regular Willys, you could probably...
because it's a Jeep, because the Willys Jeep, I would guess that I wouldn't be surprised if somebody repops a tank for that one.
Yep.
The next question we have is from Gary McBride. Hey, thanks, Gary, for the question. He's working on a 1955 Chevrolet. He's going to an automatic transmission from a 4-speed. He wants to know, where do the 2 wires go for the neutral safety switch? Plus, does it matter which wire goes where, the top wire, bottom wire? And anyway, thanks, Gary.
You're just completing a circuit, so it doesn't matter that way, but depending on column shift.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know exactly what transmission you're running with it, and we'll just kind of assume that it's like a basic GM. Could be a turbo 350, could be a turbo 400, could be 700 R4. Those tend to be the most popular. Some guys, if they're running even newer yet, than like the 4060 or 4060E, some of those transmissions. So depending on what transmission you have, usually the neutral safety switch is separate from the transmission itself on GM, unlike Chrysler and the torque plates where it's down on the transmission. On the GM, it's usually up in the steering column or attached to the a floor shifter. And really, all the 2 wires are going to do is permit you to complete a circuit.
Correct.
So if you're putting in like a low car shifter, like a low car floor shifter or something like that, there's a little neutral safety switch on the side of the shifter, just a matter of hooking the 2 wires to that. And there's 2 nuts on it, 2 wires. You just hook those up, and it's a go. It doesn't matter which side to go. You're going to still just be completing a circuit when it's closed.
2 contacts.
So the Armand Allaire, and I'm going to really butcher your name. Sorry, Armand. Working on a 60 T-Bird with a vacuum wiper system. The cable that works through the pulleys is frayed and looks likely to break. Where can these be found or sourced? Is there a better switch, or is it better to switch to electric wipers? Thanks.
I would definitely think if you're available, switch them over.
I personally,
aftermarket.
Most of my vacuum cars, I've switched to electric wipers.
Yes.
Just because they're more reliable. You'll have fewer issues down the road. A lot of cars, having 50 had a 55 Chevy once that the wipers in a rainstorm only worked when you let off the gas, and then when you pressed on the gas, they would stop right where they are. So it could be challenging. I'm sure you could put a vacuum tank on that and keep and help the reliability, but there's nothing more reliable than just flip the switch, flip the electric. So if, I'm sure like companies like Newport Engineering, some of those make an electric conversion for that. But if you really are dedicated to keeping the existing system going, there are companies like Max Auto and a few other, Thunderbird that specialize in the Thunderbirds that are going to have those specific cables and connections and everything you need to restore your vacuum system. Okay, let's see. We have a question coming in. Facebook, Eugene asked, can you tell me how to convert from a 2150 to a 2100 carburetor on a Ford 360 engine? Oh, wow. This may be, that's detailed enough that I might have to have the answer for you. I imagine that's probably
I don't know what
the 2150 and the 2100 are both Carter numbers, aren't they?
Right.
And having, my first car was a F100 with a 360 engine. Damn good truck. Yeah, I'm not sure. I tell you what, I can, Eugene, we can look into the specifics. Yeah. And, what we'll do is we'll post an answer for you relating to what exactly needs to be done to convert. I don't want to take a stab at it and be wrong and give everybody the wrong information. But yeah, we'll come back later and we'll post the answer. If anybody watching has any firsthand knowledge on the Ford 2150 and the 2100 carbs and what's involved in changing those, feel free to pipe in, add something in the discussion. We're always ready to take advice from our members as well. Okay, Jerry asks, are there recommendations for a carpet underlay that is not absorbent? Something that could be used between the Dynamat and the carpet and be less likely to absorb and hold moisture. I would think that jute would hold water like a sponge. Again. I agree. Jute not only holds moisture, it can smell bad. Especially if it's the older jute where it's like a lot of natural fibers. Not only can it smells like a wet dog if you get too much moisture inside your car, and then you lock it up and it just smells bad. What I use a lot of times is Dynamat makes also another product called Dynaliner. Which is a closed cell foam, so it doesn't absorb water, but it gives you the cushion, it gives you the sound deadening, and they have one more product that's like Dyna Shield or something, like a real heavy mat. You're supposed to use that just like over the mufflers or whatever. It's supposed to give you an extra layer of sound deadening. Yeah. But really, the Dynaliner and it's sort of a closed cell foam. It comes in everything from 1/8 inch thick all the way up to 1/2 inch thick. And it makes a perfect thing for, not only a sound deadener, gives you carpet a little squish, kind of helps even out the floor. So when you lay the carpet down, you don't have, every little ridge and bump and bolt and everything in it. Great product. I've used it in my cars and it works beautiful. And, it also works good even, I've used it above, we put the Dynamat like on the inside of the roof, and then put like the 1/4 inch Dynaliner. It has adhesive on it, and stick that to the Dynamat, and that gives me just a little more sound deadening, a little more heat control, a little bit more noise control. Jerry asks, are there any? No, that's what I just wrote. Jeez. All right, moving on. Lloyd, I thank Lloyd for the question. He has a red 1986 300ZX. Those are great cars.
Mm-hmm.
With some oxidation. The paint is single stage, and I only want to work it by hand. I have tried numerous products, but with minimal success. I have read that McGuire's M7 will remove the oxidation. What would you use to remove the oxidation by hand? So you don't want so you don't want to go at it with a machine. I would still I think you're overly concerned. At Harbor Freight, you can buy a nice random orbital buffer for under $100. That with a foam pad will get you a lot of work done. Otherwise, doing a whole car, buffing out a whole car with a lot of oxidation by hand is
A lot of work.
A lot of work. An insane amount of work. We've got our body man here, Terry. What do you think?
I would not do it by hand, no.
Yeah.
Terry, our professional body man, Terry, right, he pipes in. He says, yes, you can do it by hand only if you're serving a life sentence somewhere. It's an insane amount of work to try to buff out a whole car by hand, especially if it's really oxidized. And if it's really oxidized, you might want to first, you may want to first cut it with sandpaper. You can go with a 2000 or 2500 grit or something like that. But
it's a single stage, you said?
Yeah, single stage paint. So you can really work that stuff, and I understand he may be worried about going through, but you run a bigger risk going through by hand because you don't have the control that you do with a buffer. I would go at it with a buffer. I would get a random orbital buffer with a foam pad and use a fairly, you're going to need a fairly aggressive grit at first just to start to get off the oxidation, start to bring back the shine. And then quickly go to a finer compound to polish it out. It's a lot of work, and I wouldn't be afraid of going at it. What I would do. Oh, I just realized I forgot to mute something here. What I would do is go at it and assume, tape off your edges if you're concerned about burning through edges, and just use some of the light automotive stick tape like the yellow stuff, or you can go to the hardware store and get some of the blue stuff or something like that. And that's not going to. And Terry, you can pipe in and say you're wrong, Mark. Don't do that. But that's what I would do. I would tape off my edges so I wouldn't burn through buffing, especially if you're not real comfortable using a buffer. And then get like my big flat areas, because that's the part that's going to be the biggest amount of work and it's going to show the most is your big flats, your hoods, your roofs, your decks, and the whole main parts of the sides.
I think the key, what you're saying is a random orbital buffer for a novice is more important than a rotary buffer.
Right.
Less chance of burning.
Definitely.
Yes. And that's the point that, Terry's made sure to remind me that, get a random orbital buffer, and like I said, they're available. You can buy, if you don't want to make a big investment, there's good ones available now from like Harbor Freight.
Yep.
And to get a nice throw to it, a random orbital is based on a throw. The one I have, I think, is 21 millimeters. I think you have something that's pretty close from Harbor Freight that will actually keep you from heating up a certain area too much, where you actually start to burn the paint and worry about burning through your edges. And then, after you buff out the big areas with a buffer, then you can come back and you can untape the edges and stuff and work on that by hand. And you'll save an entire summer of trying to buff the whole car out by hand manually. Let's see. in the mid 100s.
Nice.
So, that's not a bad investment, having
Much
had friends that have tried to redo their own tanks and only ended up on a road trip where their fuel filters kept clogging up and having all kinds of issues. This is, a good fuel system, a good clean fuel system. There is good insurance on trouble-free driving, and nobody wants to go out for an event or go on a cruise or even just down to the local rod run and find out your find out your fuel filter is clogged and you have to end up on the side of the road. Nobody wants to be there, so $100 is not a bad investment in a car for peace of mind. John asks, need some of the black roof vinyl of my 78 MGB, it's MGB GT.
Okay.
Only enough for the rear quarter, coarse grain, can't get it anywhere. It was a Wabatso roof. Any help? Okay, guys, been a long while since I've been restoring any MGBs. Got to be somebody out there that knows somebody with, MGBs. I have not, convertible top. The GT had the hard top. Haven't had to source any. I'm not exactly sure where to send you to get that, but I'm sure somebody knows. And if nobody pipes up in our discussion tonight, we'll come back and we'll see if we can find a source from you through some of our professional networks, and we'll post it in the description down here later. Okay, Lloyd writes the oxidation is on the roof and hood. Well, that's what you have. And that's exactly the spots where you want to use a power buffer. Those are the big flat areas that everybody notices, and I would encourage you to, I realize, maybe you could do it with just by hand buffing, but that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and you're still not going to have the same quality of results that you can get with a good random orbital buffer. So I would encourage you, get the random orbital buffer and the foam pads that go with it. And, there's, for me, some guys like the 3M buffing compounds. Those are, they're pretty much an industry standard in the auto body industry. I use a lot of the Wizards products here. They make
McGuire's.
And McGuire's makes some good. So McGuire's, that M7 that you're talking, I used to use that on black cars years ago. It worked. But so many other products work so much faster and better and easier than M7 McGuire.
You don't have to have the different stages. You can use one cut.
Steve writes, I'm putting insulation in a 67 Firebird. Hey. Fortunately, we have a Firebird expert here today. Any tips on putting insulation in the doors?
No. Insulation in the doors?
Yeah.
I wouldn't suggest it either.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a good idea to put, even Dynamat or anything like that inside the doors, because a lot of times that stuff can start to break free. Now you've got a place that will collect water and dirt and everything else.
Powder-coated, that's the only thing I've done inside doors.
Yeah, and that's usually, and what Terry said here was that he's undercoated inside his doors. And actually from the factory, that's what a lot of the, I know when my son was doing, Mustang restorations here locally, he worked for a company that was just doing Mustang restorations, and they had set up like a nozzle spray gun kind of deal where they'd go in through the window thing and they just, hose down the inside of the door with undercoating. And that on the inside of the door skin, and what that would do is give them the sound deadening. It would make that door sound solid when you closed it. It would give it that heavy feel. And it would give you the noise and heat and sound protection inside the car. Otherwise, as far as any kind of insulation like a Dynamat or anything like that, don't put it inside the door. Put it, you can put it, if you want to put some in, you can put it on the face of the door panel underneath your door panel, or you can put it even on the back side of your door panel. It is just as effective. And, that will work, but don't put it inside the door because that'll just give you trouble down the road.
Yeah.
Okay, Roger asks, he has a 1969 Dart Swinger.
Nice.
340. I need to replace the manual steering box. I've seen different ratio options. What do you recommend? And is there a particular brand thank you very much. I have not looked specifically to see what's available for a 69 Dodge Dart Swinger. I know a lot of times we've used Borgeson steering boxes here. When we replace them, typically we try to put about what guys usually want is the quick ratio stuff anyway. So usually,
again, though, it's manual.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
you want a quick ratio. Yeah, Terry knows that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there is a trade-off. If you go too quick a ratio with a manual box,
I'd almost stick with the factory one, if anything.
Yeah.
And it's designed for, if you want to make it easier.
And that is true. And to go with the factory one, or I'm sure if nothing else, slight upgrade, but
depends on how old you are too.
Depends how strong your arms are. Depends on how much you want the strong arm, how much Armstrong steering you have.
Yeah.
The manual although our good friend Terry here, who also has a 69 Firebird, 68 Firebird with manual steering, and everybody's like, what?
He's young though. Yeah. Younger than us.
So, what you got any thoughts on that, Terry?
Well, yeah, like you guys say, if you're gonna go quicker ratio, it's gonna be tougher to start.
Yep. Yep.
I don't know. That's kind of a trade-off.
It might be a trade-off where it's a good thing to. I would maybe the best place to go is to start with some diehard Dodge Dart Swinger enthusiasts. Get some advice from the people that are cranking on those things every day. We'll do a little more asking around too, and find out if there is a specific recommendation from some of our strong Mopar enthusiasts that have actually tried this. But there are options available for you, so finding the right choice for you. Like I say, it doesn't hurt to, even if you're at a car show, ask around, talk to some guys that have actually done it, or even some of the restoration shops that actually restore. There's more than enough even here locally, there's some shops that just deal with just Mopar stuff, and they'll steer you in the right direction. The panel, then you're fighting to bring it back again, and if that be hammer welding or any other means you can get to re-stretch out all this metal that you've shrunk with your welds. So you don't want to be in that position. You don't want to get to that position. I know sometimes when there's too much flex in a panel, you can even make a little spot weld and grind it off, because that'll still shrink up the metal a little bit and take some, oil canning and stuff like that out of a piece of metal. But you don't want to be in a position where you're trying to fill a bunch of holes and doing that. It's only going to give you more aggravation down the road. So my recommendation is if you have big areas where metal's too thin or there's too much, it's too lacy, you probably want to just replace that with new metal
panels.
Okay, so we got a body man here tonight, so we're going to ask him what his thoughts are as well. Terry.
Yeah, well, it all depends on how long you want it to last, how long you're going to have it.
Yeah.
If you want to do it properly, if you're spot on, it's replace metal.
Okay.
Yep.
You can chase around pinholes. I've been there before.
Right.
They come back.
They will come back.
They will come back.
Mm-hmm.
And like Terry says, yeah, you can chase the pinholes, they'll come back. And so you to grinding and welding, and then just turn around and in a year, I've had cars within 6 months that I thought were perfect, and then all of a sudden, like the owner or somebody else comes back and it's like it's bubbling on the front of this, and it's like, oh Jesus, and you don't want to be there, over the years, get it good and straight, sound surface to work with. It'll eliminate a lot of headaches down the road.
And a 58 Impala, a lot of aftermarket panels.
There is, well, you would think so. They're not as easy to get parts for as like the 57s. The Tri-5 ones, it's like you can replace every panel on it. The 58 takes a little bit more work, as you probably know, but you can still get most replacement panels, or you can still hunt down good, clean, original metal yet, which is always preferred in my book, because nothing fits like the original. And square in the wheel well openings. And then I measure from the frame exactly where your car's at, and they'll be able to tell you if something's off or if you need to be changed, or if by chance, your car is not perfectly square and true. They have the equipment, they can actually, do what they call a pull on it and actually get things straighter. Although if your car's already in paint and everything else, it's not always the best time to be pulling on it, because then you might be throwing off half a dozen other things. So, from the sound of it, you're still in the build process. It might be a good time to, make the investment in a frame shop and have somebody actually put it on a rack and tell you exactly where the car is at, and it'll save you a whole bunch of headaches down the road. Thoughts, Terry?
I agree with you. You have to have that rear squared up first.
Mm-hmm.
So take some diagonal measurements to make sure it's square in the car, and the front aligns with the back.
Yep.
Okay, I didn't see picking up, but Terry agrees. Check the rear end first, and then go to the front and do diagonal measures. Also make sure side to side, and then diagonal. Make sure everything's square to the rear, and you'll have a good idea where you're at that point if you can do it on the. In your garage kind of thing. Moving down, let's see, we've got Kevin Bird writes. He has a 1940 Ford pickup with old lead repair on the upper rear cab. Some of it is loose, some is still okay, but has cracks in it. Do you recommend removing it all and use filler, or leave the good lead and use filler with the rest? Personally, I would pull it all out, and that's just me. Any thoughts, Terry?
I heard a previous lead repair.
Mm-hmm.
I'm suspect of any repair, so I remove
repair,
because you don't know how it was prepped and how well it was done.
Yep.
Especially now if there's cracks in it, suspect.
Yeah.
Okay, now I know it may not be being picked up on Mike, but what Terry has to say is he's always suspect of any previous repair. And that's a good way to be. And I don't even trust old Bondo work, so why would I trust old lead work? You have no idea if the guy that did the previous lead work, if the metal was prepared and everything else properly underneath. And worse yet was the fact that you said you have cracks in the lead, and that it's showing some in places that it's having adhesion issues if it's coming off or if it's having crack. So that lead is not good anyways. I would just, as Terry even recommend, just get rid of all the lead. There's plenty of good, if you don't want to re-lead it, there's plenty of good fillers nowadays to replace it. If you don't want to do the lead work again, a lot of guys don't. It takes some learning to get there, and people just don't do enough of it anymore. So I encourage you to just get rid of it. Get out a propane torch and melt away. Don't get the metal overly hot. It doesn't take much to get lead to start flowing. Take a rag and some propane and just start releasing all that lead. Eventually you'll get down to just a thin lead coat on. I don't encourage to be grinding away on lead.
No.
You can end up with lead dust all over your shop and in your garage.
In your lungs.
In your lungs. Which is where ultimately we want to keep it from getting. But so it's a good idea to get as much of that lead off there as you can. You can use just a propane torch, and then as soon as you got all the lead out, you can start working on either straightening the metal or using a filler or some other sense to fill that dent again. Stuart writes, I'm restoring a XB Ute in Australia. Wow, Ford XB Ute. Now you're going to really go over all our heads, Stuart. We're on the other side of this pond. I love the product range you guys have, but it's usually especially in other every so often I watch British videos and stuff like that, and they always talk about products and go, I've never heard of that before, and I end up doing some googling and research to try to figure out what it is, and then usually I end up trying to find an American product that will do the same thing.
Comparable.
So there are options, but I think we could maybe do something in that regard. I'll make myself a note because otherwise I don't remember anything.
An XB Ute.
XB Ute sounds cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Utes always look cool. It's like the American El Camino. Australia just
That's what they remind me of.
Everybody in Australia just goes, "Oh, you silly Yank." All right. Steve writes, "I'm getting ready to mount fenders on a 31 Model A. Is there a material should be used between the fender and the body?" Yes, fender welting. It's like a vinyl material that wraps around a welt core. Bead, I think, is like 3/16 or quarter inch. But it's called fender welting. And one little trick I'm going to give you in installing it, when you start to install it, before it comes with a solid strip that of course you have to notch it around bolt holes, but it also pays to just go through and make several fine notches all the way down and go almost to the bead, because even on the rear fenders, the body kind of shapes around like this, and it's going over. So getting that fender welting to lay in there and lay really flat requires making several little thin notches in the welting, and then every so often you have to make a little bit bigger notch for around the bolt holes. Take your time, and if you take your time and fit it around all that stuff, it'll look really nice when you're all done. If you have like bigger straight areas and stuff, you may not want to notch it just because you get as much contact area as you need. But for the most part, like rear fenders on a Model A, you're going to want to notch the whole thing. Years ago, the fender welting that was originally used on a lot of 30s cars came with notches already in it. When you actually pull the original stuff out, it almost looked like a comb. It was so that was making some of that for a while with that comb type texture, but they've gone away now, and I'm sure it's a manufacturing thing. It's cheaper to just make a solid strip and then require the user to cut it to however they need. Yeah, that's my little tip. I should be able to source that from especially Model A fender welting. You can get it in a number of different sources. Any of the big restoration houses, just look for fender welting. They'll have it in typically black and a few different colors as well. Come on, guys. Okay, moving forward, we have and we got this one in earlier online. Jim asked, he wants to convert his manual steering to power steering on his 57 Chevy Bel Air. And that's not uncommon. A lot of guys especially with some of the older cars, want to go with power steering. Unlike Terry and his 68 Firebird, who on that, it's like, I think it's called rust proofing hidden areas and stuff like that. And it's like a frame coating that they used. And we used it, like I said, we used it in the rockers on this car. And we actually put a bore scope in there just to see how well it actually got in there and coated everything. And it was like, night and day. It was like everything in there was coated. There was not a bald spot anywhere. It was just amazing. So, Eastwood makes a good product for getting inside of things. If you want to coat it beforehand, any good, a good epoxy primer is a good choice inside there. I wouldn't leave it with the EDP coatings that they come with, because that tends to be, those aren't really designed to hold up over time, and even epoxies aren't necessarily, if they're exposed to UV, can break down fairly quickly. But we have a paint guy here. Any thoughts, Terry?
Yeah, so definitely if the primer that's on the metal is not soluble, if you can't wipe it off with lacquer thinner, it's good.
Okay.
So that's good, but I would epoxy. Epoxy inside those panels and outside. As you said, Mark, epoxy doesn't hold up the UV light, so it's got to be coated on the outside. Inside doesn't matter.
Yep.
I would mask off with masking tape your weld zones, so you get a good weld, and epoxy everything else.
Yep.
After you weld it, go in with a wand and cavity wax, like you said, or some sort of wicking corrosion protection, and you'll be good to go.
Yep. Okay, in case you didn't catch all of it, I know Terry's not mic'd up. Terry's recommending, epoxy is a good choice inside the rocker panel. And exactly, it's not exposed to UV. It's not going to break down real quick inside your rocker panel. It'll be just fine in there. But to avoid getting it on those areas where you're going to be spot welding, epoxy and spot welding just don't mix.
No.
And so it's a good idea to avoid getting it in the areas where you're going to weld. You can even, I personally, I know some guys are big on the weld through primer. I also know, like, my son refuses to use them because he feels they contaminate the welds. and he feels that he loses some of his weld strength using a weld through primer. Um, and so, I still leave that as a personal preference. I'm not a big advocate. I'm not a big proponent of weld through primers, because I feel you can leave the metal there bare, get a good weld, and then come back and coat both sides if you're doing lap welds on a floor, you can use seam sealer and seal up the welds. You can use wicking primers and stuff that will actually, like even some of the Eastwood stuff like we used on here, where it's almost it's kind of runny, but it will get into all the nooks and crannies and cover everything in there. Some of those kind of products like that do far better than of sealing it up and preventing, because whenever you're going to weld something, even with a weld through primer, right around the weld, you're going to burn up the primer. The primer is gone. It doesn't survive the welding process. So you still have a point where you can get rust and corrosion to build up, even using a weld through primer. The benefit of a weld through primer is the places where you're not spot welding, there's a primer in between them. Yeah. But you still need to go through the process of sealing up and those areas where you did put the welds in. So it to me, it always just makes more sense to concentrate more on sealing it up afterwards. If you love using weld through primers, go ahead and keep using them. It's a personal preference. I know professional body shops that use them. I'm not a big fan of them. I prefer welding metal to metal. Although there are people, I think on here there's even several videos where Craig Hopkins is a big proponent of using them. So it's a personal preference at that point. Next.
I think, Terry, you actually glued some of your panels.
I did. I glued a lot of my body panels together. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Panel bonding adhesive.
And that is an alternative, and we haven't really talked about that a lot. That using panel bond to actually attach panels. I know there's some body shops here in town that will put on replacement rockers and everything they do is panel bond. They still generally have a point or two where they'll tack in and actually put in a metal to metal weld in a few spots, just for that added safety. So if you did, it doesn't rely on an adhesive bond completely. It also becomes a mechanical bond. Yeah. So you have two means of holding that in place. But yeah, technically the adhesive side of it, the panel bond side of it, I've seen demonstrations where they take two pieces of flat metal and they panel bond them together, and then they connect them up in a frame bench, and actually do a pull where they pull it apart to find out at what point this panel bond or the panel bond actually breaks, and instead what happens is the metal will shear on either side of the panel bond before it will actually cause any separation of the bonded area. Panel bonds work. They've come a long ways. And actually there probably is a place for them for some enthusiasts who, want to take time to learn about them and actually use them on their cars. Like I say, I've seen pro body shops use them without thinking twice. My son uses them all the time on bedsides, on the sides of trucks and stuff. But even then, he still, in places, will put in a spot weld in the front and the back, and in places, just to be insurance compliant, because they've had cases where they panel bond the whole bedside on a truck. Then they put it, they spray paint the whole dang thing and put the baker on it and all of a sudden it got hot enough that the whole bedside fell off the side of the truck.
But let's keep it from peeling. If it were to be an accident, it keeps it from peeling off.
Yep.
Shear, no, but peel it can peel.
Yep. So yeah, and it can be a good avenue for some people who want to learn about doing some spot panel replacement or stuff like that. There is room for the panel bond in the car restoration, and some guys use them. Typically here we do a lot of things with just bare metal. Everything's metal. But there isn't, that's not to say one's good or bad. The panel bond has come so far in its evolution.
I will say, be careful. Do not use it on an exterior panel that's going to be shown because you might see a ghost line. There's specific procedures for trying that. Don't recommend it. I recommend welding anything that's exposed.
Okay.
Anything that's hidden, panel bond. Exterior exposed, you may see a ghost line of that expanding and contracting.
Sure.
Okay, in case you didn't pick that up on Terry says if you are going to be using panel bond, he recommends against using it anywhere on the outer body where it could be noticeable because it can still get what they call a ghost image or a ghost line. And usually that occurs in certain heating conditions. If it's outside on a sunny day, sometimes the panel heats up enough where you can actually see it in your top coat paint. And I know guys run into that even welding across the top of their roof with a chopped up car. If when you got like different, thicknesses of metal and stuff next to each other, sometimes, you can still see the ghost images of those. So it's probably not a good thing to use as, doing, like patch panels on the outside of your car. You're not going to replace, half the lower part of your trunk extension on the outside of your car. It's probably not a good solution there. But it has its place, so it's worth considering. Let's see, we've got here.
Once the rocker.
Once the new rocker panel is on, there's no way to. There is no hole to spray anything in afterward. Yeah, any rocker panel should have some sort of drain hole. Otherwise, that's probably why it rusted on the first place. And I don't want to make light of it, but typically all cars somewhere, and it maybe a reproduction one doesn't have the drain holes in it. That wouldn't surprise me a bit. But typically, even the bottoms of your doors, the bottoms of your rocker panels, all have drain holes. They need to get the moisture and the dirt back out again. So, if your car does not have drain holes in your rocker panel, it could be a source for problems down the road. If you're dead set on not having any holes or any drain holes in your rocker panel, moisture will get in there even without any holes. I can guarantee you that. But if you're dead set on not having any drain holes in your rocker panel, there's still avenues in which you could get in there to coat them. Even if you came through a back rocker, through a wheel
inner fender,
or something else, and if it was something that you would drill and fill later, then you've only got one hole where you're,
They make nice body plugs to fill that hole.
Yeah,
Back in the day.
They do make, like Terry mentions, they do make body plugs to fill holes where you've sprayed in and stuff like that. So it might, just something to consider, We're not here to tell you how to do your restoration, but I still would encourage you to have some kind of drain hole for your rocker panel. Um,
Rudy.
Brian writes, hi, can you explain the difference in torque values with or without an extension?
Torque wrench with an extension.
With a, are they, are
As far
like
as an extension on your torque wrench,
Does it matter?
I
I don't think it does. I mean, as far as, I mean, unless you had a swivel type.
I suppose there's some
Extension.
flexing of an extension that could get lost.
I suppose you could get enough twist.
Right.
Um,
I wouldn't worry about
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's,
okay, according to Terry, you wouldn't worry about it. I guess none of us have ever, most of the time you try to avoid using too long of an extension anyway. You're just using a socket.
right.
And I have used extensions before, but not frequently, but I have. And I imagine, the discussion was, do we get enough torque or do we get enough twist in the extension itself that it would affect the
Lower
torque
torque rating.
setting
Yeah.
significantly?
I don't think so.
And the popular opinion here is not really.
I would say if you're torquing 150 plus, maybe something like that, it might, but I mean,
Yeah.
I can't see it twisting enough to make a difference.
Torque is still
A
torque.
significant difference.
Yeah, significant
And
difference.
I'm sure I've got some professional machinists now that are
Right.
also rolling their heads.
Yeah, and he could tell us.
While
Who
the
could tell us?
while the Ute owners in Australia are still laughing at it.
You don't.
So at this point, I just want to say, our opinion is no, Brian. But it shouldn't significantly make a difference unless you're going to a really big torque number. If you're putting on a pinion bolt at 250 pounds or something like that, yeah, maybe an extension might not be a good choice. But for most torque settings on a car, it's probably not going to be a significant number there. Anyways, want to thank you guys again for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. I see we're at the top of our hour, maybe a little past, so we're in a little bit of trouble so far. Again, great event. Guys, thanks for coming out. We've got a few questions we've got left to answer. We'll get back. I'll do a little research, ask a few people. We'll add those to the discussion area at the bottom in the next day or two. Again, thanks for coming out. There's if you haven't done it already, there's a sign up for the Classic Card Restoration newsletter. If you're not getting the newsletter, it's off to the side. I see it on my screen here, but it might be somewhere else. Go ahead, sign up for that. That's the way we give you, any late breaking news, anything, and then we throw in some kind of cool stuff now and then. So, sign up for the newsletter. Check that out. Thanks again for coming out this month. We'll see you again next month, and then we'll talk a little bit about, making sure your car is ready for putting in storage for the winter, except for you guys in Phoenix who will talk about getting your car out of storage. All right, guys. See you next time. Thanks.